So do we want to go back and do it? Well, everybody's here has been here in previous sessions, so you know who I am. We're not going to do that.
This is our third session, International Coaching Week with Joanna Davis, talking about or helping us to think and prepare and get better with our ICF competencies.
Yeah.
Welcome, Joanna.
Thank you. So the conversation is really that, PCC does not mean perfect certified coach. I am an MCC. I am a master certified coach. It doesn't mean magical certified coach. Some people call it magnificent certified coach. But you know what? I still stack questions. It is my particular, I'm an MCC and I'm not a perfect certified coach. So PCC stands for Professional Certified Coach. Professional. Do you know any professional in any industry that is absolutely perfect? And professional has a range. I mean, I've met some professionals and I'm like, wow, that's professional. Okay. Anybody met anybody like that?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one or two. And there's a range of professionalism. So the same is true for PCC. As a PCC assessor, when I am listening to a call, I am listening to see if they have met the baseline for PCC. Not the baseline for MCC. Because the top level of PCC is the baseline for MCC, right? And that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, do they understand what they're doing? And that's why I go back to the competencies when I'm supporting you to work through the markers. Now, today we are scheduled for competency 6 and 7. Just really aggressive. I mean, we got through competency 8 and didn't really talk about the markers yesterday. And we barely got through competency 8. So to think that I'm going to get through 2 competencies, but I'm going to put them on the screen as soon as I find them again. There we go. So competency 6, I'm going to have to move you all around. Competency 6 definition says focuses on what the client is and is not saying to fully understand what is being communicated in the context of the client's systems and to support client self-expression. Focuses on what the client is and is not saying to fully understand what is being communicated in the context of the client system and to support client self-expression. How many of you look at the PCC markers and really think about this? Like, is this, I'm trying to support my client's self-expression. I'm trying to know what the client is communicating in the context of the client system. And I'm going to ask a question. What is even a client system? What does that mean? Oleska.
It was very interesting because we spoke about that competency 6 yesterday on the webinar about culture. And, to listen the culture, to listen the context where the client comes and be able to not be fixed on our own and have this flexibility and listen, exactly what you said, the system and support the client self-expression. And it was very interesting to look at that competency from the perspective of different cultures.
Yeah. And I want just to reinforce what Valeska is saying, that we have clients that it's very important to them to give you the context of what's going on before they tell what's going on. And when they do that, they're already telling us a story. While other clients, because culturally is like, this is the problem, and then you have to start, okay, where does it started and all these things. So, and respecting this, right? Because let's say as a coach, if we don't connect in this competency, we can just cut the client and try to bring them to certain points because our own thing. But this awareness will allow us to say, oh, this is the one that wants to give me context, so give me context. Or this is the one that is more direct, but I have to work with them to bring what is underneath. And this is all about this, what Valeska said, just awaken this to me.
Yeah, beautiful. Suli, what did you want to add? Your hand's up and you're on mute.
I know, looking for the, that's part of coaching the whole being, is taking in the influencers that are the emotional, mental, cultural, environmental, and social values, and listen on each level to identify what's really we are listening to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Listening on all levels.
Yes.
So if I switch and go over to the PCC markers, let me see. Hopefully they'll show up. Maybe they won't. There they are. Okay. If we go over to the markers, now when you look at the markers, somebody read 6.1 for me.
Can read it. Coaches' questions and observations are customized by using what the coach has learned about who the client is or the client's situation.
Boy, that marker makes a whole lot more sense in the context of the actual competency, doesn't it? Like it, for me, it changes the whole flavor of that. Because when I read this without looking at the competencies, my thought was, oh, what I've learned about the client is, what I learned about them in the foundation session, and they like this and they don't like that, and their values are this, and they, da, 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 da. It was much more cut and dried than looking at the whole cultural context of the individual. Marcia, I love that observation that, there are clients who I have to give you context. And there are clients cut to the chase. And, I had one of those this morning, and we're halfway through the coaching call. And I'm like, wait a minute, you said you wanted next steps, but I'm hearing you already know the next steps. And all of a sudden we get underneath it to, well, there's some imposter syndrome going on there. But, what does imposter syndrome have to do with next steps? Aha. So we got to what the client needed, but it took more of the digging with that direct client. So as we're looking at, and we've talked about 6.2, I think we talked about 6.2 on Monday. A couple of the interesting nuances of PCC assessing and the markers. What's the difference in inquire and explore? Because I'm looking at 6.2 and 6.3 and 6.4. What's the difference in inquire and explore? Does anybody know?
One is asking questions, and
Okay.
the other one is going around with curiosity rather than questioning.
I love that answer. And I wish that was the answer that they used in the PCC assessing.
I tried. That's what I thought.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I talk about it, because that would be my idea. Love that. According to the ICF, an inquiry is asking a question. To explore may mean that you observed and then asked a question. It may mean that you asked 2 questions, but exploration requires you touch it more than once. So exploration requires at least 2 touches.
Exploration is a little bit of tell me more, what else, and this kind of things, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it may be, you know, like I did with my client this morning, you know, I noticed when you were talking about this is what I noticed. And the client acknowledges that, you know, what's inside of that for you? That's an exploration. So for 6.2, it's words. You can ask, I can ask, or I can explore. Both will get a 6.2. When it comes to emotions, same thing. I can ask or I can explore. When it comes to 6.3 with energy shifts, nonverbal cues, other behaviors, exploration is required in order to be scored a 6.4. What would that look like for you? Or can you give me an example from, please keep confidentiality, but an example from a coaching session where you explored an energy shift, a nonverbal cue, or other behavior?
If you ask something along the lines of, especially when you said energy shift, I think when I do process coaching, I tend to just ask, what are you experiencing here? And I use the word experience intentionally versus feeling, because I don't want to focus on the feeling.
Very good. Very good. It also doesn't bias how they process. Because I can, if it's a visual processor, what are you seeing in this? If it's an auditory processor, how are you hearing that? If it's a kinesthetic processor, what does that feel like for you? Or how does that work for you?
Yeah.
But so what I'm hearing is, let's first of all, how do you know, or what prompts you to believe that there's been an energy shift?
And one thing that sometimes I do is in sharing things that I notice in what Shakti said. And when the client is telling a story, I sometimes say, hey, there is a word that's coming to my head, and I'll share the word with you. And then the word is caring, for example, in an example or something. And in this moment, when they hear the word, they cry, or these comes with because it's like they are trying to find something. We tell them a word that is present, and then the response is exactly this. So sometimes I heard about some people telling about competence that we cannot give certain words, but I share words or images sometimes to say, hey, there is this image coming here. What does it mean to you? And then the emotions really come to the surface.
So what you're talking about, or what I'm hearing and what you're talking about, is 7.5. Coach shares with no attachment. That's the tricky one. Coach shares with no attachment observations, intuitions. So when a word appears, that's an intuition. Yeah. Comments, thoughts, or feelings, and invites the client's exploration through verbal or tonal invitation.
So then, this is when the 7.5 connects with the exploration. Okay, good.
So what I'm hearing is your 7.5 precedes the energy shift. Okay. So crying is one example of an energy shift. or how you might notice an energy shift. What are some of the other ways you might notice an energy shift? What are some of the signs?
It could be the tone, the speed or the tone in which they're speaking.
Yes.
The pause, when they pause for a longer time.
What are some other energy shifts you can notice?
Faster breathing,
Notice their breathing. Yep. Faster
agitation.
or slower. Yeah.
Right, posture. In terms of how they're sitting, yeah, posture.
faster.
Yes.
There could also be movements like sudden or unexpected, like out of the ordinary movements in that moment, just a shift in movement.
What else?
Their facial expression, or how their eyes begin to switch, or their nose, or they begin to bounce their heads, or just have different reactions, physical reactions.
So
Or
Like pulling the hair.
Or they immediately try to change subjects or go in different directions.
Yes.
yeah, that too. Yeah. So, and the reason I want to bubble up like what is an energy shift is because people tend to think that energy, oh, you can't measure that. Sometimes I will get goosebumps or, or get a flush feeling. And in response to something that's going on with the client. And my observation, my observation is when you said whatever they said, that gave me goosebumps. Anything in that for you? I observe. I ask a question. That makes an exploration.
I have a question. Isn't that not being detached when you're talking about yourself?
It's part of observing
Yeah.
or intuition. Just like when Marcia gets a word,
Yes.
sharing that. So what happens is it counts as both a 7.5 and a 6.4. So this is something we had talked about on Tuesday, is that you can hit multiple markers
Yes.
with one statement or one question.
I
don't
go ahead.
need to try to do that because then it looks like, it winds up looking like you're trying to do that. For instance, if I go down to the 8s, coach invites or allows, or the 8.2 and 8.3, coach invites the client to state or explore their learning in the session about themselves, the what, and then 8.3 is, or the who rather, and 8.3 is about the what. So what did you learn about yourself and the situation in today's coaching? You're not going to get credit for either marker because it's a stacked question.
Can you?
So-
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
When you
go ahead.
finish, I'm stuck on, can you redefine for me inquiry and exploration? Can you give me
Yes.
a definition,
Yep.
please?
Exactly. An inquiry is one question.
Okay.
An exploration requires 2 touches. It
Okay.
may be 2 questions. It may be an observation and a question. Mine, the way I structure mine tends to be an observation and a question because how's the client going to know what I'm talking about?
Thank you.
I noticed when you said XYZ, your face flushed. Or your head went down, or your shoulders dropped, or whatever. What's going on for you? There's my observation and my question. That's an exploration. So it's funny because I go from the theoretical to this is how you make this one thing work. So what questions do you have around, oh, you know what? 6.6 tends to be one of those that can create a lot of fun in assessing. Who would read 6.6 for me?
I can read it.
Thank you.
6.6, coach allows the, oh, we're reading what's on the screen, right? Coach allows the client to complete speaking without interrupting unless there is a stated coaching purpose to do so.
Okay. So as I plug in my computer because I forgot to, there we go. Laptops. What is a stated coaching purpose?
Having a good reason to interrupt or to make an observation.
Yeah. So give me an example of a good reason to interrupt. Like, how would you say that?
I'm going to interrupt you, or I need to know what this means.
Yeah. I'm
May I
telling,
interrupt you because I would like to get clarity, or I like to understand what you mean.
there you go. I need to get clarity. I want to understand what you mean. Valid coaching purposes, right? Because if the coach isn't clear, can the coach coach? If the coach doesn't know what the client means, can the coach coach? Probably not. I can coach without knowing what the subject is because I've done it for demonstration purposes. You know, don't tell me what this is about and I'm going to coach you. But I can't coach if I don't know, if I'm not clear and I don't know what the client means. And Suli, you do the interruption the way I will say, I'm going to interrupt you. I had a client literally say back to me, "Oh, no, you're not." So what did I do?
I say, okay.
Exactly. Sit back, shut up. The client told me I'm not interrupting. Who's in charge? The client. There we go. So, and sometimes I get really aggressive with my interruption. I've been told I'm very aggressive with my interruptions because I will literally do the timeout sign when I'm going to interrupt somebody. It's very effective.
Mhm.
Not everybody's comfortable with that. Valeska, I see your hand up.
I was thinking we can interrupt asking for clarity or things like that, but sometimes for me it happens like happened yesterday. The client said something that was really important in the whole context of what we are working, but she said that and she continued talking. You know, she was not going to stop that. And I said, excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you. I heard something powerful and I want to know if that make any sense to you.
Thank you for doing that. How did your client respond to it?
She removed her glasses. She did like okay. And then I said, and she asked which part. I said, can you repeat what you said? And when she repeated, it shifted. She had a huge insight. But the first thing she did was she removed her glasses. Was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. And the coaching purpose of an interruption is for the client's benefit. Every time. If I can't understand something that happened, it's for the client's benefit that I understand. So, you know, a coaching interrupt God, what are some of the other, I heard you say something powerful. I didn't understand what you said. I need clarity. You've said the same word 3 different times. What does that word mean for you? Okay, so now I've hit 6.6 and 6.2.
Mm.
Did I do that on purpose? No, happy accident. So what are you getting about interruptions right now?
If it's valuable for the client, do it.
Yeah. How many of you are super comfortable interrupting your clients? My computer raised my hand on its own. I love that.
The energy is so strong that your computer gets you.
There is a gremlin somewhere.
AI.
Yeah, right?
You're communicating you in the same energy level as your computer.
Apparently. And you know what? I literally have to stop sharing in order to put my hand back down. This is so funny.
I think it
we
depends
go.
on the context. My experience is the more connected I am with what is happening, more present with the client there, I'm more comfortable, I feel, to interrupt.
You know, now that you were saying this, I noticed that I feel comfortable, and it happened before, when the client, for the first time in the cadence of sessions, break a pattern. So they keep coming, saying the same story, and then one day they say something different. I said, oh, let's pause for a moment. I have to tell you something. I noticed this time you switched that story to this one, what it means to you. And then things like what Valeska said, taking the glasses, stopping, smiling, or even crying happen, because it's like a victory for them. And this is, I think, is the only moment where I can say I feel comfortable, because it's like, oh, this thing happened, but that's for me.
Yeah. I love that. I love that example of a wonderful interrupt. And I love the way you say it. Let's pause for a moment. It's so much nicer than I'm going to interrupt you. You're so much nicer than I am. I'm going to invite those of you who are not really comfortable interrupting to become very comfortable interrupting, knowing it is in service to your client. Because if the client is on a long, rambling story, this is the one that most, especially newer coaches, they have a really hard time with. When do I interrupt? What is a good time to interrupt? And they're on this long, rambling story, and the more experienced coaches that I see interrupt that story pretty quick. And for me, it sounds something like, I'm hearing a lot of words, and I don't know what you want me to hear out of this. So I just saved my client 10 or 15 minutes of rambling time that they can now use for coaching. If you were the client, would you want your coach to save you more time to be used for coaching? Okay. So if long rambling stories are not serving the client, or I'm hearing that there's a story here, but I want to check to see if this is how you want to use your coaching time. Because maybe they really just need to tell the story, the context. They just really want me to have the context. I totally get that. Shakti, I saw that you had your hand up and I noticed you took it down. Was there a thought you wanted to share?
Yeah, you sort of touched on it a little bit, so I wasn't sure if I should still share. But I guess in relation, I'm extremely comfortable interrupting. but in coaching, I'm so paranoid about not interrupting, about the interruption being in service of the client, that I get so in my head about it that it makes it hard to, it makes it hard for me to really stay with the client, because a lot of people just do like to talk a lot, right? And tell lots of stories. It's not common to find people who bottom line very easily, even in executives. And so it takes me out of my level 2, 3, because I want to make sure that when I'm interrupting, I'm doing it in service, not because of not because of anything that I am feeling like, oh, this is a story. Oh, this sounds like a story. Like, no, it really has to sound like a story, right? Because sometimes it's just a longer thing that the client has to say, and it's good to know the difference. So I don't have that 100, maybe, super high level of comfort yet to know that I know for sure every single time.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is a bit of attempt at mind reading. And what I've noticed, and I had a mentor say this to me. So there's a question. Who knows when it is a good time to interrupt?
The client will know.
Yes. Yes. So this could be a moment that you take to clarify your coaching agreement. We talked about coaching agreements on Monday, and you take a moment to clarify your coaching agreement. I tend to be an interrupter. I tend not to allow a lot of time for long stories. And I notice that you like to tell the story about things. Do you want me to interrupt you so that we can bottom line it? Or is it important to you to tell the stories? And do you notice the tilt of your head moved? Something happened. What you get?
It's so straightforward and simple and clear. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And that was not a bad 6.4, by the way. Well, if I'm going to do it, I got to demonstrate it. Anything else around interrupting? All right, I am going to see if I can share my screen again. See if my hand will stay down this time. Oh, we're still on the markers. Let's go back to the competencies. And competency 7 evokes awareness. The definition facilitates client insight and learning by using tools and techniques such as powerful questioning, silence, metaphor, or analogy. So in competency 7, what are we trying to do here?
Making sure that we are understanding the clients with clarity, understanding what the client's communicating to us.
Actually, no. So active listening is what you're talking about, and that's competency 6. And I love that you brought that up, because one of the
That's
things.
6.7, right?
What's that?
I thought we were on, is that, you're talking about?
Oh, sorry,
6.7?
I was reading competency 7, the evokes awareness. I was reading the facilitates client insight
I'm
by
sorry.
using. That's okay.
I read 6.7 for some reason.
That's perfect. I love it. Great answer for 6.7. And what you did was trigger something that came up in the PCC assessor training, which is if you're wondering which marker to mark, go back and look at what are they trying to do? Is it active listening or is it evoking awareness? So anything in 7, so I switched over to 7 and did not do a good intro, obviously. Anything under 7, evoking awareness, is all about client insight and learning. What I'll hear with newer coaches is an effort to show off their tools and techniques. And that's not what it's about. So I love 7.1. I can't get them all on the screen. I'm trying, but it's not going to work. Considers client experience when deciding what might be most useful. And that goes back to that context, and that goes back to what we've listened for. One of my favorites is 7.2, challenges the client as a way to evoke awareness or insight. I love challenging my clients. How many of you really love challenging your clients? Ooh, good. This is one of the things that sometimes it's hard for people to do. Challenging clients and interrupting clients can be sketchy areas for coaches. So I'm glad to hear that it's not difficult. One of the things that doesn't show up in the markers that shows up in the competencies is 7.6, notices what is working to enhance client progress. And that's hard to measure, but they measure it through the different things that they're looking for in the markers. I'll switch over to the markers here in a minute. Adjusts the coaching approach in response to client needs. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see you take yourself off mute.
So the point I use here is when they tell a story, and you said sometimes you don't need to know the content or their work. But when we play back and say, hey, and that's the story I'm hearing. You are building a house and you're probably not yet ready with the foundation, but it seems you want to paint the wall already, right? And then when I tell the story, it's not related to their work, but this is what I'm hearing, what it means to you. Then they go back to their own story that they know the details, right? And they rebuild and say, yeah, why I want to paint the wall? I don't even have walls, but so sometimes we give them something that we don't need to know the content, but we change that. And this is what the 7.6 notices what's working to enhance clients' progress. I give the story back without the content and they play back and, oh, I get now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's 7.5, sharing that intuition, sharing the observation, sharing and asking the client, and with no attachment. There's so many elements to 7.5. And I'm talking the PCC marker, not the competency. We have the competency on the screen right now. And I'm hearing in this, in what everyone is talking about, helps the client identify factors that influence current and future patterns of behavior, thinking, or emotion. You're doing that in your coaching. Invites the client to generate ideas about how they can move forward and what they're willing or able to do. I love reading the competencies because it's like a whole set of, oh, wow, this is a different way to say it, to make the markers have more meaning. Supports the client in reframing perspectives. I'm It wouldn't be a coaching session without that, would it? And shares observations, insights, and feelings without attachment that have potential to create new learning for the client. Yeah. The training that I received, what they basically said was, don't share observations, insights, and feelings, or to share observations, insights, and feelings in proportion to all the other markers. So sometimes a coach will see, oh, I can share observations, insights, and feelings. And that's what they want to do, as kind of like directing the client where they should go. It puts the coach into a driver's seat. So sharing it, but not all the time. And now let me see if I can get back to the markers, because we only have 4 minutes left. Let's see. Why is it not letting me? Oh, I know why. There we go. So if we come back to the markers, there's a couple of specific things that I, when I get to the top of the screen, the ICF drops their menu down. So 7.2, 7.3, and 7.4. What do they all have in common?
To go beyond the current thinking.
Yes. Yes. And what I hear a lot when I'm doing assessing is a very heavy lean on 7.1. The current way of thinking. But we've got 3 separate markers that talk about beyond current thinking, going out beyond. And I would highly encourage, use them in proportion the way they're presented. 3 out of 4 questions go beyond current thinking. So 7.2 is about the who, the person of the client, their being. 7.3 is about the what, the situation. And 7.4 is about the outcome. And I tend to, like when I shorthand the markers, 7.2 literally says beyond who. 7.3 says beyond what. 7.4 says beyond outcome. Those were my cues to, where are we going with this? Is there a marker that asks us to explore the client's past? No, there is not. What does that tell you?
Yeah. And then this is when and many people tell a lot of stories about the past, but then we have to say, hey, and what does it mean to you right now? What do you think about this as the person you are now? Because if not, they tend to be dwelling in this past, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can even say, and what does this mean about the outcome you want to create? Oh, now we're beyond current thinking.
I always ask, how does that relate to, your goal, where you're going?
Absolutely.
So there is still value in knowing that story, not the coach, and it doesn't have to be a coaching meeting topic, obviously, but for the client to know that story, I think is still important. So whenever, because that past story is always going to creep in if the client doesn't have it, but it's there. Does that make sense? What I said, it's like, I feel like I just got coached on this during my certification coaching. So that's why I bring it up, because there was a focus on that story, because that story was feeding a saboteur.
Uh-huh.
It was feeding a limited belief that kept coming in to my current story, to my present life, and to my future goals. And so there was a little bit of focusing done in terms of, okay, what is that story? And, let's have a picture of that story. Okay, it wasn't the analysis and psychology or anything like that. And then, okay, what is the present story? And what does it look like going forward, right? So it actually created a nice way to think of it and move forward.
Yeah, and that's part of active listening. That is absolutely part of active listening.
Okay.
But nowhere in the competencies are we asked to go into the past.
No, I understand. Okay.
Yeah. And we're 1 minute past our time. We have to release the room or release the Zoom so that the next group can start. I want to thank you all so much. I love these explorations. There is never enough time.
Right. Thank you so much, Joanna.
Thank you so much, Joanna.
Thank you, everyone. Amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
everybody.
Looking
not do it
forward for
without you.
tomorrow. We'll see
Have
you
a blessed day.
tomorrow.
And there is a an in-person event in Miami tonight
Yes,
at West Palm.
yes.
If you can make it, the information is on the ICF website.
I wish I was closer.
Yeah, me too.
But I think it's closer to you, Marsha. Is in Miami Beach. The
No,
event.
it's West Palm Beach, isn't it?
There's in Miami and
Miami
there-
Beach. There is
Oh.
one in Miami Beach.
Oh, okay, so I'll take care of that. I just saw the West Palm Beach, and the West Palm Beach is beyond.
No. There is one in in Palm Beach up there, and the other one.
I'll
down
check
south.
that one because this changed things for me.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
That's why we make these announcements.
Good, thank you.
Take
Thank you so much.
care. See you tomorrow.
Bye.